Hello, my name is Tony Ouma and I'm a solutions architect here at AWS. Today I'm very excited to show you how you can leverage event-driven flows using Amazon AppFlow and Sagemaker to classify Salesforce cases using machine learning. But before we proceed, I want us to take a step back and talk about a use case that is very common for a lot of our customers. Imagine a scenario where your customers open a support ticket through a web portal or email. The case is then routed to a specialist who has to read the description of the support ticket, then make a decision on which team needs to be assigned the case. This is very common, but it does pose some challenges to your business. This process is error prone. The person assigning the new case might not have expertise in that subject area. There's also the issue of longer wait times for issues to be resolved due to the manual processes involved in opening a support ticket. This can also lead to low CSAT scores because your customers will have to wait for a very long time for them to be able to start interacting with the subject matter expert for that particular support cases. A better solution is actually to use machine learning to classify the cases using Salesforce auto-assign rules to route the case to the appropriate team. And we are going to look at how you can do that in the upcoming sections. But before you build a system that is capable of classifying cases or Salesforce cases in near real time, there are two critical components that you will need to address before moving any further. Those two critical components is the integration between AWS and Salesforce, and the other one is machine learning. Previously, our customers spent a lot of time and resources building connectors to move data between their SaaS applications to AWS. But what our customers kept telling us was that they want to spend time focusing on their customers, focusing on solving their business problems, and getting insights into this data. And this is where AppFlow came into play. We built AppFlow so that the customers can spend time solving their actual business problem instead of maintaining, scaling, and building these connectors. The second piece is machine learning. For you to build machine learning models, you need to have the infrastructure and the tools to build, train, and develop machine learning model, including hosting. And this is where Sagemaker becomes very helpful. And we are going to look at how you can be able to leverage the Sagemaker capability to host your machine learning model that is going to be used to classify the cases. So let's talk about Amazon AppFlow. So AppFlow is a fully managed service that enables you to securely transfer data between your SaaS applications like Salesforce to AWS services like S3 with just a few clicks and zero coding. The way it works is very simple. You define your data flow requirement. This is basically the source for your data and the destination. Then under the covers, we provision all the resources that you need to move your data from point A to point B. And this can be compute, storage, or networking resources. And then finally, AppFlow will invoke the flow. And there are three types of flows that you can configure using AppFlow. The first one is event-driven. The second one is on-demand. And the third one is scheduled. For this demo today, our focus is going to be on event-driven flows because when a user opens a support ticket, we want to classify that Salesforce object in near real time using machine learning model that has actually been hosted in Sagemaker. back to machine learning. The main service that we are going to use for this demo to host our machine learning model is going to be Amazon SageMaker. So SageMaker is a fully managed service that provides every developer and data scientist with the ability to train and deploy machine learning models without having to build, scale the underlying infrastructure for your ML needs. So it does have components that you need, like notebooks, and we do have services like ground truth for labeling, but for our use case, we are only going to use it for training and inference piece of our solution. So for our demo today, at a higher level, we are going to have a web application, and this is just a standard Amplify web app that is hosted in CloudFront distribution in S3 and S3. And the way it works is the users will go to the web application and they'll be able to authenticate using Cognito. Cognito is one of our services that we do offer that allows you to authenticate users and basically provide you with a directory store for storing your username and passwords. And then once the user has been authenticated, they will fill out a support form. And behind the scenes, the web app is using Salesforce capability of web to case. And that essentially creates a case object in Salesforce. And when a sales object is created in Salesforce, there is an event that is fired, which triggers the AppFlow event-driven flow. The event-driven flow will pull the data, and once the data is pulled by AppFlow, it's going to be delivered to Amazon EventBridge. So EventBridge is a fully managed AWS service that is essentially an event bus that allows you to route the events to different AWS services. In our case, it's going to route the event to AWS Lambda. And Lambda is a serverless compute service. You don't have to provision any compute, set up the operating system or any sort of thing. In other words, you just provide your code and essentially, we invoke the code for you. So what happens here is that EventBridge will send the event to AWS Lambda. And what Lambda will do, it will basically look at the data, look at our object, and pick up the description field, because that's where we have the description of why the user is opening that particular support case. And it's going to call SageMaker endpoint, which is a fully trained ML model, NLP model, that is able to classify that particular case and tag it, or basically tell the Lambda function what type of case it is, or what's the category of the case. And when we get to the SageMaker piece, I am going to walk you through our SageMaker notebook. Well, it's no longer meant to be a deep dive into SageMaker. The goal of me building this demo for you is actually to demonstrate to you how you can leverage the power of AppFlow, or the capability that we are offering you with AppFlow, to be able to do the art of the possible using your SaaS application. So in our case, we are trying to improve our customer experience by automating some of the manual processes that are prone to errors and things like that in your Salesforce activities, and use machine learning to basically help automate that process. So this is the art of the possible, but all this is possible mainly due to the fact that we have Amazon AppFlow that has simplified the integration between your SaaS application and AWS. Now, we are going to jump into the demo, but before I jump into the demo, I'm kind of going to show you what the complete application looks like, and then we are going to dive in and start configuring the different components that we need for our application. So let's switch to the web browser and take a look at our sample application. So here is our sample app, and you can see it's very simple. It's just a web portal where our customers can come in and submit a support ticket. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So I'm going to put in my name, then I'm going to put in my email, and I'm going to put my phone number, and the subject, in this case, issue with my email. Then we're going to put the support description, which is essentially the user is having issues with their Outlook application. Then we're going to submit the support ticket. Then we are going to get redirected back to the thank you page or success page. Switching into our Salesforce application, and you realize that here we have configured assignment rules. And in this case, it's case assignment rules. We have a couple of them. The one that is active right now is the one called customer support. And if you open customer support, there are two rule entries. Let's take a look at the first one. So the first rule entry is looking for a case object, and if the field case object of if the field known as the case type, the value is category 5, then that particular case is assigned to a queue called category 5. Okay. The other one is having a second type of category, which is category 4. So the way it works actually is that when you create a case object, AppFlow gets triggered, and it sends once AppFlow is triggered, it sends the event to EventBridge, and then EventBridge will trigger our code. And then once our code has been triggered, what actually happens behind the scene is that we call Sagemaker endpoint, used by getting the value of the description of our support ticket, and then we classify that particular case. Once we classify that case, then we come back and update the field type for that case object. Once the field type has been updated, then that's where the auto assignment rules kicks in. So I already received an email that I have a case that was created, and I am going to move that case to this screen. Give me a second. That's our case, and you can see that our case ID is 001117. Now, if we go to our cases, we can see we have a case here called 001117. If I open that case has been classified as category 4. And this happened automatically using AWS Lambda, AppFlow, and Sagemaker ML model to essentially tag this particular case. Then next, let's switch gears here. Let's look at how we use Sagemaker to deploy this model. Sagemaker is very, very modular. And in my case here, I'm using my local laptop as the Sagemaker notebook. It's very straightforward. The first thing I do is use the Sagemaker SDK and Boto3, which is the AWS SDK. I split the data into training and validation data. Then I create an estimator, which is an estimator using the AWS Sagemaker SDK encapsulates the training, where I specify the size of my compute that I'm going to use, together with where I'm going to save the output. I set some hyperparameters, then I do the training. Once the training is complete, I actually deploy my Sagemaker model. And at that point, I'm ready to consume my model by using an API. The actual Sagemaker model, the actual machine learning model, is hosted in Sagemaker endpoints. And if you go to AWS services in the console, and we're going to look for Sagemaker. As I already mentioned, Sagemaker is very modular. It has a lot of components, notebook instances, but in our case, what we are going to use is Sagemaker endpoints. and this is the name of the endpoint that we are going to use. Let's take a look at the code for this particular web app. As you can see, it's a simple Angular application, and this particular form HTML code was generated by Salesforce Web to Case. And the most important part here is the org ID, which has been blurred out for security reasons. But you supply the org ID together with the return URL so that once a user successfully submits the case, they have a return URL, which in my case is a thank you page. So at a much higher level, my application is very simple. A user goes to the web portal, submit their case, which essentially is created in Salesforce. That in turn triggers an event. And once the event has been triggered, it's sent to EventBridge, and then EventBridge will invoke my Lambda function, and we're going to talk about the Lambda function during our configuration. And once that Lambda function is triggered, it's going to call the Sagemaker endpoint, which essentially is a machine learning model endpoint, and get an inference and turn around and classify my case. So let's go ahead and switch gears here and jump straight into the configuration of AppFlow together with the other components that we need. Great. Let's head over to the AWS console and start configuring the integration. So in the AWS console, we're going to look for AppFlow. Then we're going to create a new flow. I'm going to call my flow Sagemaker SFDC events. You have the option of configuring encryption using your customer managed keys, but we are going to go with the default and not use that. But by default, all the data transfer under the covers is encrypted. Then we're going to click next. In the next screen, we are going to configure the source of our data, which is going to be Salesforce. Then we are going to create a connection to a Salesforce organization. Basically, essentially here we are providing authentication so that AppFlow is able to read your Salesforce data. So I'm going to call this Sagemaker Demo Connection. I'm going to click continue. Since I was already logged into my Salesforce, I'm going to click allow. Now that we have a connection established between within AppFlow and our Salesforce organization, the next thing we want to do, we want to select which type of objects we want to be sent to AWS. In our case, we want to be sending event-driven flows, so we have to select Salesforce event. Then we select the object that we want to capture events from. In this case, it's going to be the case object. Next, we select the destination. In our case, it's going to be EventBridge, if you remember our previous architecture diagram. Then we are going to create a new partner source. Let me talk about that a little bit. So a partner event source is used by AWS partners to send events to an AWS account. In this case, Salesforce is a partner with Amazon EventBridge. So we have to generate a partner event source. So we're going to click generate event source. Then in case the payload that is being sent over to AWS is greater than 256 kilobyte, we want to save that data in an S3 bucket. So we have to configure that. I'm going to not specify any prefix. Then I'm going to select next. Here I'm going to map the fields that I need for my object. Right now I've selected all the fields, but we do have the option of selecting only the fields that is relevant for our use case. So I'm going to go with the default and select all the fields. Then I'm going to click next, next, and finally create flow. Word of caution. before activating the flow, you want to make sure that the partner event source that has been generated by AppFlow is associated with an event bus. So we're going to head over to EventBridge. And we see we do have a partner event source that was created by AppFlow that is in a pending state. So what we want to do is select that partner event source and associate it with an event bus. And you should get a successful message there. So now we go back to event buses. And here we go. We do have our event bus. And looking at our event bus, there is an option where it's saying schema discovery has not been initiated. In this case, schema discovery allows us to discover the schema of the events that is being sent to EventBridge. And we can actually save those schemas into the schema registry. But before you can do that, you want to turn on schema discovery on that particular event bus. So you select the radio button and you turn on schema discovery, and the state should switch to started. Now we can head back to AppFlow and activate the flow, and the status of the flow should switch from, it should be switched to active. Now that we have the partner event source associated with an event bus, the next thing we want to do is actually to discover the actual schema. We have already turned on schema discovery, but since there is no data that has been sent over to the event bus, there is no schemas that has been registered for that particular event bus. So that's what we're going to do. So I am going to go here, and if you look at the run history, there is no flow run history. So I'm going to head back to my app, and I am going to submit a support ticket, and that was successful. Now if we go back to our run history and refresh this, we can see that it was near real time, right? There was an event, there was an execution that happened, and you can see the amount of data that was transferred. Now if we go back to EventBridge and refresh this and go to discovered schema, we should be able to see a schema that was discovered for our data. And looking at this schema, you can see that we can see the JSON event schema, how it looks like for that event. We can see the case number created by basically the fields that we selected from AppFlow, the on ID and etc. So now that we have schema registry configured, we have the event bus configured, the next thing we want to do is create an event rule. So a rule matches an incoming event and routes them to the targets for processing. In our case, we want to use the rule to capture an event and route it to a serverless compute, which is Lambda, so that it can be able to send that to our machine learning model and be able to predict or classify that particular case, depending on which category it belongs to. So in our case, we only want to capture Salesforce events from AppFlow for only new events. And for us to do that, we want to create a rule. So I'm going to create a rule. And that rule is going to be associated with the partner event bus that we created earlier. And we are going to call that new rule. Let's see here. We're going to call it AppFlow SFDC classifier. It's an event pattern, and we're going to create a custom event pattern. And in each event that is sent to EventBridge, we want to look at the following fields. We want to make sure that the change type is create. We only want the events that the change type is create to be sent to our Lambda function. So if someone updates an object, we don't want to process that. We only want to process this for new events, or basically new objects that are created in Salesforce. So we also look at the status to make sure it's new, and the origin is web. So when that object is sent to EventBridge, we are looking at these fields, and if these fields are true, if the schema matches what we're looking for, whereby the change type is create, the status is new, and the origin is web, then we want to route that event for processing in our Lambda function. Next, we select the event source, and this is where we select the target. Where do we want to send that event to? We have lots of options. We can send it to SQSQ. SQSQ is our queuing service that we do have in AWS, or in our case, we are going to send it to Lambda function. Then we're going to select the function which we're going to use to send that event. So in our Lambda function, we are going to select a pre-provisioned Lambda function that I have already called case classifier. Now, I will show you the code for this Lambda function. It's very straightforward. Then next, I go ahead and click create. All right, so now we do have a rule that will route events that match this pattern right here to our Lambda function. Next, we go back to our application. And in this case, I want to create another event. Okay. Then when we go back to AppFlow and refresh the run history, you can see that we do have an execution that is in progress. It's near real time. Refresh that. Still in progress. And it's successful. Now, when we go back to our Lambda function, and this is our Lambda function. Go to monitoring. So before I move further, so this is the Lambda configuration page. We upload the code as a zip file, which I'd already done. The runtime is already Python 3.8. I'm not going to dive deep into how Lambda function works and etc. But the most important thing here is to understand that Lambda is an event-driven compute, whereby it's invoked when an event is sent to it or in response to an event. In our case, the event that invokes our Lambda function is EventBridge. Then when we click to monitoring and look at the Lambda function logs, we have a log stream here, and we click on that, and you can see that we did receive an event. And again, I'm going to quickly, before the end of the webinar or this session, show you the code. You can see that the event that I received from AppFlow has been logged in the Lambda function logs. So let's take a look at that Lambda function code and see what's happening there. I'm going to make this bigger. So here, the first thing I'm doing is I'm setting up the log, of course, and then I have a function that is called Sagemaker. What that function is doing is it's capturing the event that is coming in from EventBridge. And if you remember the schema, and once I capture that event, I pass the case description that is coming in. Then I pass that data into a function called process case. And what that actually does is take that case and using Sagemaker SDK, in this case the Sagemaker predictor object, I'm able to send that to a Sagemaker endpoint. This is the name of my endpoint, and I get back a response of what's the category of my that new case. And here you can see that this function here is returning an object of type case category. So it's pretty straightforward. So in a nutshell, that pretty much summarizes our demo, right? We had a web application that our customers will go in, put in, or open a support ticket. They'll be able to authenticate with AWS Cognito, and then we have an event that is sent to Salesforce. Using CDC, the events are sent to AppFlow, and AppFlow in turn routes that event to EventBridge. Then Event bridge routes the events to a Lambda function, which in turn calls SageMaker model to make a prediction. With that said, thank you for watching.